So now let's talk about actually handling exceptions. So if you have some suspicious code that may raise an exception, you can defend your program by placing the suspicious code in a try block. So we're going to start off with try, and then you add a colon. So actually, let's start off with our actual suspicious code. So let's say that from the example from before, a equals 5 divided by 0, right? Okay, so we open the try block. And then after the try, we include an except statement followed by the block of code which handles the problem as elegantly as possible. So actually, I should be writing this as follows. So first we start off with try, then we put our suspicious code, don't forget to indent, suspicious code within the try block. So here's our suspicious code. And then, after that, we do an except statement. So except, how do you spell except? Except, we'll call it exception. And then, so in the older version, in version 2 of Python, we have the syntax would look like this: exception, comma, e with a colon, and then you print, and then you do the whatever your code, whatever code you want to execute if the exception occurs. So we want to print what exception occurs if there is an exception, if there's an error. So as you can see, it says invalid error syntax. So let's do it in this version, in version 3.5, which I'm using in Sublime Text 3. You have to use as. So let's do that right now. As you can see, it says division by 0. Now we can also specify the type of exception to be thrown. Now this is being called throwing an exception. So you throw the exception. For example, let's do the following. So let's delete all this. And then we're going to say n equals int. So we're typecasting to int input. And then we want to prompt the user to enter an integer. And then this might be a suspicious code because what if the user enters a character of some sort and not an integer? Well, we're going to say, okay, so let's try executing this code with keeping in mind that a value error can occur. So let's say value error. And then, so this time you don't have to define a variable, because last time we defined basically any exception can occur. But this time we are looking specifically for a value error. So if we expect an integer, but we don't get an integer, it'll say print, we're going to say, hey, this is an integer. That is not an integer. And remember, we're working with the data input from one of our previous tutorials, from the data input tutorial. So you're going to have to build, since we're using input this time, we need to communicate with the console. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over to Sublime Reply, REPL, and then run current file. So let's say I write 1 in text. As you can see, that's not an integer. Okay, so moving on. We'll also do an example right now with multiple accepts. So we're going to type out the following code. All right, give me a sec. Let me just write that as code. So let's say sum equals 0. And then, so we have a couple things going on. We're going to try to open a file. And when you open a file, you should it's good practice to try and throw the exception if there's no file available. It's good because in case you're doing something and the file is missing or removed, you can say something like, your file, we don't have this file stored on the machine, or it's not found. So you can just say something like, you use an exception. So what we're going to do with this code, we're going to basically, so let me just write it out. So for number in file, so we have a for loop, and then indent, and then we're going to say sum. We're going to accumulate a sum of 1 plus 0, 1.0 divided by integer, so number. Oops, I did. There we go. Wait. Oh, whoops. We want to typecast number, because remember in files it's actually it's a character, so we want, or a string, part of a string, so we need to typecast it to an integer. All right, so we're taking this, we're commuting the sum of numbers inside of 1 divided by whatever numbers in the file, stored in file. So we're gonna print the sum. All right, so here's our code. And now we're gonna have a couple except statements. So except zero division error. Now in Sublime Text, it's not autofilling for this part, but when you type it out, here, let's try actually. No, it's not autofilling, so let's just type it out, division. Zero division error. Okay, so we're saying, okay, we'll be expecting a zero division error possibly inside this in this code. So let's respond, which be on the lookout for it. So let's say number in file equal to 0. And then we're gonna have another one that says except, and an IO error. This is another type of error that's gonna say, okay, so the file does not exist. File, let's just say DNE, just to shorten our typing. All right, so let's build this. As you can see, oh, there's a mistake here. Hold on a sec. Line 6, syntax error, invalid syntax. Okay, there's an invalid syntax error. So, oh, of course, forgot the colon again. IO error, forgot another colon. So don't forget your colons, kids. All right, so file DNE, because the file's not there to begin with. And you can't do this, you can't try the zero division error. You can't check for it because, well, there's no file. So it's considered good practice to give us more information about the error included. So that's why when you have excepts, you should also print out whatever happened to tell the user or the programmer to tell us what happened. And we also have one more thing. It's called the finally block. This is executed regardless, this block of code is executed regardless of whether or not there is an exception. So we're going to add to this code a finally statement, a finally block, excuse me. And then what we're going to do, we're going to say we want the sum anyway from this code we just did. And then we're going to, if there was a 0 of some sort or something, we're just going to close the file anyway, just for safe measure. So let's do that. And let's see what's, okay. So as you can see, there was no file to close, but it still gave us 0 anyway. So see, file says name error, file is not defined, and therefore we couldn't close it. But anyway, since there was an error, it still gave us sum because we said print out sum, and as you can see from the beginning, sum is still 0. And that pretty much concludes this section. Tune in next time.